Everyone out there, I want to just tell a little bit about who our guest is. We're joined by one of my absolute favorite songwriters of all time. His name is Mr. Dean Dillon. He's written songs for some of the great artists of our time. I've wanted to interview you for a long time, so this is a real thrill to have you here. I want to kind of go back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your childhood. What was it like?
Well, we were dirt poor, but we didn't know it because everybody else was too, you know. My grandfather was a deep mine coal miner, and my grandmother worked in a town in East Tennessee called Oak Ridge, which was a secret city, so to speak. Back in the day, it was a gated city, and then my mother was a waitress in a truck stop there. So we grew up in a pretty hard scrabble life, and then moved to Michigan and when I was 5 years old, and stayed there for about 5 years, and then moved back to Tennessee.
What would you say was the happiest time from your childhood?
Oh, hell, that's easy. Fishing. I was fishing from the time, I was big enough to walk almost. People can't believe it today, but when we were 3 and 4 years old, we'd walk by ourselves up to a fishing pond. Me and my uncle, who was actually a year younger than I was, and throw a cane pole in the water and fish. Back in those days, there weren't any crazed monsters out there to get you, and we had enough common sense to be careful of the water.
Do you still like to fish?
I do. I love freshwater fishing. Go to Canada every once in a while. Do a lot of saltwater fishing in the Caribbean, and still love it. Nothing like catching that next big one.
What about on the other side? What would you say the toughest time was when you were growing up?
I think the toughest time was when we moved to Michigan, like I said. Up until that point, you had to have to understand, my grandparents had raised me up until that point. My mom had gone north to work and send money back home, but my grandparents raised me, so when she remarried and moved back north, then they took me away from really the only parents I had at that point, which was kind of puzzling to me. And then when we moved back to Tennessee, then they left me up in Virginia with my stepdad's mother, whom I'd never met before. And I couldn't really figure out who I belonged to at that point. And that's where I gravitated really toward the guitar and music. And it became my solace and my comfort, and, just dove head first into that.
Were there particular musicians or bands that you liked the most?
When I was 14, I won this talent contest, and so I did a TV show on Friday nights all through my high school years, which provided me with enough money to go do pretty much what I wanted to do. And I used to go to the Civic Auditorium in Knoxville and see all these great bands, Roger Daltrey and the Who, Edgar Winters, Carlos Santana. Yet, my grounding was in country music. I was just an avid fan, and my hero was Merle Haggard. But I wanted to go and explore different kinds of music, and I went one weekend and heard James Taylor and Carole King in concert, and that pretty much changed me as far as melodies were concerned. I fell in love with Carole King melodies and James Taylor melodies. And I remember thinking, man, if I can just take that type of melody and infuse that into these lyric-driven Merle Haggard songs, then you come up with songs like Marina Del Rey and The Chair. They're just that's truly where those songs came from, was that influence. And a lot of my stuff was, melodically was influenced by them.
Do you think it'd be possible to, determine What is more important to you as a songwriter? Is it more important to have a great melody or more important to have great lyrics?
Well, it's more important to me to have both. You can't have one without the other to make a great song. You really can't. I mean, if there's going to be a weakness, then it's not going to be great. You got to have both to have greatness. And that was taught to me by Hank Cochran. Here's a guy who wrote Make the World Go Away. I wrote The Chair and Oceanfront, and Set 'Em Up Joe, and Is It Raining at Your House, Homecoming 63, those kind of songs. But he always implored me, to think outside the box when it came to melodies when we were writing. The lyric end of it, he knew I had down as much as, he had taught me. And, anybody will tell you that 99.9% of the time they look at me and go, okay, what's the melody? Because most of the time it's something different than what you'd expect. That's what I look for, the difference in melodies. And
would you say that Hank Cochran is the person who taught you the most, songwriter to songwriter?
I had some great teachers before him. Kent Robbins was one of my teachers, and John Swears was another one of my teachers. But the one that did have the most impact was Hank. Because when Hank and I would write, he would always explain to me why we wrote this line this way, and why we said what we said when we said it. There was a Hank Cochran blueprint, so to speak, to follow. And it was a successful one, and you can't argue with success.
How would you describe Hank Cochran as a person?
Funny, witty, loved to have a good time, had a serious side, a bit chaotic, which was about how I described myself at the time too, So we were like two peas in a pod. Hank was like a father to me. He became a father to me. We spent a lot of years on a boat in the Caribbean called the Legend, and I had the utmost respect for him. And he taught me a lot about living and life and love and laughter, and he just taught me a lot about everything.
That time in the Caribbean it's explored in the documentary about you and about your songs and your life. I just watched it. I gotta say, I loved it. It's called Tennessee Whiskey.
Great. Yep.
The Dean Dillon Story. What do you think of the documentary?
Actually, I love it. I think it's pretty dead on. It's fact-based. I think you get the sense of where songwriters coming from when they write what they write, and it also shows that I think everybody thinks that a songwriter goes in this room and they're in there forever how long and they come out magically with this song. That's just not the way it really is. There's a lot goes on behind those closed doors in creating a song. I think the reason Hank and I had such great success together is oftentimes today when you walk in a room in Nashville, or it's been this way for a long time in Nashville, you'll walk in with a total stranger, somebody you've never met. And in a span of 3.5 to 4 hours, walk out with a song. I think the success that Hank and I had was due to the fact that we actually spent 24-hour days together, and got to know each other and love each other the way we did and appreciated each other. And it made it really, really easy. It set a relaxing tone to go about our business. He was as avid and as fervent about writing songs as I was. Albeit he was, some 20 years older than I was. that's what it took, to do what we did.
When you're going to write songs with somebody, what is it you look for in the other person?
Well, that's what I'm saying, man. You're not really looking at the other person as much as you're looking at the idea. You don't really know this other person that well a lot of times. More often than not, it's the first time you've ever wrote with them. It's just you tend to focus more on the task at hand than you do the other person. And I think a lot of times it's hard to get soulful with something when it's done that way, because you don't know this person that well.
Would you say that pain or joy is a greater well of inspiration for you as a writer?
Well, I can tell you right now, pain's been a far greater asset in my world than joy has. If you look up on a wall and look at the awards I've had as far as song, a lot of them are pretty damn sad.
Yeah.
So I'd say that'd have to be it.
Would you say that writing songs is almost kind of like a therapeutic thing?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It can be about what happened to you last night, last week, last month, this morning, what happened to your friends, whatever. But, yeah, it's pretty much one big therapy session with a guitar and lyrics.
When you're somewhere, like, for example, you're at a restaurant or you could be at a hotel lobby, and over the sound system, you start hearing a couple notes or a couple of words, and then you realize, oh, this is one of my songs. To this day, is that something, do your ears perk up when you hear one of your own songs?
It's funny, I don't think I've ever really been that way. As far as, I've never really been that way. I mean, it's just, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but when I write something, a lot of times, I move on from it to the next, and I'm always looking for the next one after that. It's not what I've done in the past, it's what I'm going to do in the future. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's not pleasing to hear your stuff on the radio or something like that, but when I do hear something on the radio, I'm probably sitting there thinking, well, what am I going to write next? Not necessarily, what is that song playing on the radio?
Well, what about the very first time that happened?
Oh, the first time I heard one of my songs on the radio, I pulled over and cried. Because thinking that I'd actually written something good enough to get on the radio. Because I felt that was a huge achievement to be able to do that. It's a song called Lying in Love with You, and I remember exactly where I was. I was driving under the overpass at Fessler's Lane on I-40, just outside Nashville, when Lying in Love with You came on the radio. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people in this documentary, Tennessee Whiskey, and they talk about what your songs mean to them, and also about just what like, for example, George Strait, he talks about how long you all have known each other and how much work you've accomplished together. This is probably a difficult question, but what would you say the biggest compliment you've ever gotten? Not just from somebody known, just all in all.
Just having people walk up to you and say, you know what, I danced my first dance with my husband to that song, or we played that song at our wedding, or on the backside of that is we played this song at my father's funeral, or people walk up and say, I named my children after you. I mean, it's I don't know if you can use the word rewarding, but it's pretty profound that someone would think enough of something that you wrote for it to become a memory in their life.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about George Strait. How would you describe the relationship that you all have as creators together?
Pretty darn awesome.
Yeah.
We've been friends, like I said, since 1980. Had a great relationship. He's a great guy. George is like me in the sense that, he a very loyal man. And just as loyal as he was to me, I was to him. So, whenever I wrote something that I thought was anything, I always pitched it to him first. Every Monday morning of every week that he ever recorded, I was the guy sitting across from him at 10 o'clock in the morning playing him songs. So it's been a great relationship. Been rewarding for both of us. And we both appreciate what each other's talents are. And we're great friends.
One of the other recording artists and singers that's in this documentary is Kenny Chesney. And I think this is just one of my favorite songs. And you wrote it I believe you wrote it with Bill Anderson. And I'm talking
a lot of things different.
Yeah, what a song.
Magic.
Tell me about that song.
Well, we had 2 days scheduled to write. And the first day, he started telling Roger Miller stories, so we didn't get anything done. And then the second day, we started at 10 o'clock. By noon, we had, one of the worst songs known to mankind. And I looked at him, I said, normally I'm in my truck headed to my ranch about this time, but I said, I can't imagine walking out of this room without having written something great with you. And he pulled a sheet of paper out of his briefcase, and I read it. And it was just lines about things that people would have done differently had they had the chance to do it all over again. And that was really where the song came from. And then, as whispering does, he has that wonderful delivery. We sit there and put it to a Dean Dillon melody, and fortunately for the two of us, we got it to Kenny, and he recorded it.
What do you think of Kenny Chesney?
One of the greatest guys in the world. He's just a great guy, man. He's just an all-around great guy. So caring. He's really a caring person. People don't know this, but he's been flying his private jet to the islands after this disaster, carrying medical supplies, dog food, cat food, whatever the necessities were that are needed in the islands, St. John and St. Thomas. He's been flying down there. He started a fund for it. He loves that place down there, as do I. I've spent a lot of time in the Caribbean. But he's a great guy, man. Fun to be around.
One time I was I want to say this was at Lakewood Amphitheater in Atlanta, and I got into a conversation with one of the security guards there, this elderly black gentleman, and I said, "You've gotten to meet all of the stars that come through here. Who is the nicest person that you've ever worked around?" And he had no pause, and he said, "Kenny Chesney." So it's consistent with what you're saying.
Just real respectful, and loves everybody. It doesn't make any difference who you are or what you are. Kenny has respect for everybody. He just loves life and loves people and loves music.
A lot of times people ask songwriters what their favorite song is, and I don't ask that question anymore. But I would like to ask you this. If you had to pick a song of yours to represent what it is that you do, what song would that be?
I've heard that question asked of songwriters, and I always laugh. People go, "What's the favorite song you ever wrote?" And I've heard time and time again songwriters go, "Oh, man, they're all my babies. I can't really distinguish one from the other."
Always.
My reply to that is always, "Well, I've got some ugly damn kids then." Because they're not all great. But I guess the top two of mine that I love them because I love to play them, and I love the melodies to them, and I love the lyrics of them, is The Chair and A Lot of Things Different. But then you got stuff like Marina Del Rey and Nobody in His Right Mind and Boats by Chesney. I'm Alive by Kenny Chesney. They're all just wonderful songs, man. I've just been blessed to be a part of it.
This might be a hard question to put into words, but what do you like about country music?
How it was or how it is now?
That's a good clarifier.
No, man, you know what? Music has to evolve. It just has to. Or it's redundant. It's the same old thing over and over and over and over. And people tire of it. 12, 15 years ago, country music evolved into this rap/party genre. And it got away from, it became all about a good time. You know, and anything and everything to do with a good time. Prior to that, country music was about a good time, a bad time, a great day, a bad day, losing, loving, and then it got encapsulated here about 15 years ago into just being all about a party. And it's gone on, you know, for almost 15 years now, and I can appreciate it, what they did, and if that's what Nashville wants to sell, I think that's great. But it's become really, really, really redundant. And so much so that, I don't turn the radio on because, unfortunately, the country music that I know, life wasn't one big party. You know, it had its ups and downs, and it still does. And at the root level of country music is about hardship and hard times. That's the part of it that I loved enduring to people, enduring them to the hardships of life, and giving them hope in songs, and trying to provide to them that there was a way out of all that. And it just, it's sad to me that I don't think there's really there's not a lot of songs out there any come to my mind that are life lessons or things of that nature. But you got to understand, country music too is also geared toward a whole nother audience these days. Country music used to run the gamut from 15 years old to 90. Right now, it seems like it's just zeroed in on this one age group in particular, which is, 15 to 25. And I think that leaves a lot of people out.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people have tuned out. But, hopefully, I don't ever want it to go back traditional the way it was. I want to see it evolve into something great again. It just hasn't been great. It's been a party.
Yeah. Well, what artists out there do you think are kind of doing the best job of keeping it moving forward in a good way?
Chris Stapleton.
Great artist.
That's it in a nutshell. Right there. I don't, I'm a writer, so I don't really, if I were to go to Nashville right now and you read me the top 20 artists on Billboard, I probably couldn't name you 2 or 3. Because I don't feel like, the number one rule I always used was, don't listen to what's on the radio because you're 2 years behind. Because a lot of that music was cut in a year or 2 years before and is just now making its way on the radio. So the only way you're ever going to set a precedent or be different is to stay and play your own game and be your own writer and do your own thing. And if you're fortunate enough that what you do set you apart from everybody else and people love it, then you've accomplished your mission.
There's a very interesting part in the documentary. I thought this was interesting. And you were talking about the song Oceanfront Property. And you said, I don't want to be known as a guy who writes funny songs. And that made me wonder.
No.
Well, there's so many people nowadays that that's exactly what they do. But it made me wonder, how do you want to be perceived?
I just want to, my legacy, the one I'm leaving right now, is about real life and real things. And that's the way I want it to be looked at. Like I said in the movie, I don't want to be known as a funny songwriter. There ain't a damn thing funny about life. To me, life's a pretty serious business when you get right down to it, The song you're talking about, Oceanfront Property, I didn't want to be known as a funny songwriter. It's just like an artist. You put out a song, or an actor, you get labeled as being this person, and the next thing you know, you can't find any work because you're labeled as that kind of person. Follow me?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to get locked into that. I wanted to be constantly evolving, always changing, searching for that next great melody and that next great lyric. And in my case, I love writing about the raw and real. The hard times, the good times. But that's the deal.
Speaking of the hard times, and speaking of, you said life is pretty serious. There's parts in this documentary, it's really honest. You talk about things like struggling with sobriety, and everybody either struggles with something or they know somebody who does. If anyone out there is thinking either somebody that they know needs help or they're thinking, hey, I need help myself, what would you say to that person?
Man, there's a way out. There's absolutely a way out. I don't care how deep you are. I don't care if you've gone to the bottom, took a shovel and dug 6 foot deeper. There's a way out. There's hope. There's all kinds of programs. There's the Almighty himself. And all it takes is a hand reaching up so someone can pull you out of that hole to get you out. But there are ways out. And there was for me when I was in my darkest hours. I had great friends who cared about me, and I reached my hand out and they pulled me out of it. So don't ever give up the shit. Ever. Don't ever give up hope. Just lift up your hand.
When somebody is venturing out into whatever it is that they do, would you say that it's more important for them to be confident or more important for them to have some humility?
When I got to Nashville, if you didn't have an ego, they gave you one. You don't have to be, we might get bleeped on this, you don't have to be an asshole to be confident. I think confidence should come from within, and be confident in yourself and in what you're trying to achieve. Believe in yourself. Tell yourself this is what I'm about.
If you could tell the listeners out there about this Mountain High Music Festival, it's going to be coming up January 10th through the 13th next year, 2018. Tell them a little bit about that.
We're talking about 400 to 500 people at this venue. This is not a great, big, huge festival. It's a very intimate, up close and personal, shoulder rubbing with the stars festival. When our main stage acts are done at night, then at 11 o'clock, we move to another section of the hotel and have these real intimate guitar pulls that last till all hours of the night. But yeah, and this year is shaping up to be the best year we've had. Toby Keith, Scotty Emmerich's coming. Jamie Johnson's bringing his band back this year. Kelly Pickler's coming. Steve Hopper wrote all that old shredding stuff. And On the Dock of the Bay. Just a great, great writer, guitar player, and singer. And then Sundance Head, who won The Voice last year, whom I just got through producing some sides on. Working in the studio with him. He's coming out, bringing his band. Tracy Bird's coming. It's going to be a heck of a weekend and a lot of fun.
That's the Mountain High Music Festival. And if anyone wants to check that out, it's mountainhighmusicfest.com. What is the best thing about being Dean Dillon?
My wife. That's the best thing, man. My wife, she's amazing.
Yeah.
She's just a great, she's the exact opposite of me. She's wakes up with a smile on her face every day, raring to go. And just a wonderful, wonderful heart and soul. She's just a beautiful spirit.
Do you have any dreams that you would like to make come true that have not yet?
You know, not really. I've done it all. I think I've achieved just about all I wanted to achieve as far as my writing goes. I've been so blessed in that area. I think the one thing that I'd like to do that I haven't, I'm getting there, but I haven't got to do yet, is finish up my shop and be able to spend my days working on my cars. I love old cars. I just built myself a shop at my ranch in Gunnison, Colorado, and looking forward to spending some time in that garage turning wrenches.
For anyone who's listening into this interview, wherever they are in the country, what would you say to anyone who's tuned in?
You know, love on one another. There's too much hate in this world. And we need to start looking at our fellow man in a whole different way. We need to start looking at them, with love in our eyes instead of hate and anger and fear. And just start loving on each other. Give them kudos. Little thing, cheer them up. Pick them up when they're down instead of kicking them when they're down. The world would be a lot better place for it if we loved instead of hated.
Well spoken. I'd like to invite everybody to visit the website. It's deandillon.com. My last question. How do you define Dean Dillon? Who is Dean Dillon at heart?
Man, I'm a pretty spiritual guy. Loves the Lord. Loves what I do. Like I said, I just love the heck out of my wife and my children. Likes to have a good time. Has things that I love to do, like I said, working on my cars and stuff. That I just want to be the best guy I can be today, faults and all, and put one foot in front of the other and move on.
I like that.
Good talking to you, Paul.
It's been an honor. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you for all the songs.
You're welcome.